The music you are listening to right now was generated by a computer in less than 10 seconds. Hey, even the voice narrating this video was synthesized with just a few clicks, and almost for free. The future is already here, and although it's still a bit quirky, AI will take over a lot of things we take for granted in our day-to-day lives, and music is not an exception. The good news is, this has happened before. Today we will look at how ATMs and even horses can help us understand what the future of music, particularly for musicians, may look like. Remember the early 1900s? Yeah, those were simpler times. Soft drinks included hard drugs in their formulas, and you were dead at 50. But there's no time for nostalgia now. What I'd like to discuss particularly is how the car replaced the horse in just a matter of years. But what has this to do with music? You'll see. Stick with me. When the first automobiles were starting to gain some popularity, there were many skeptics of this new technology. Even a banker once told Mr. Henry Ford the following: "The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad." A visionary without a doubt. The biggest fear, when the car takeover started happening, is what would happen with the jobs related to the horse industry. With it having been the preferred mode of transportation for centuries, of course, the panic was substantiated. But innovation, when groundbreaking, is hardly ever stopped. The 20s were the doom of the horse, and with it went almost all of the product and service business attached to it. The bright side is that the new automobile needed a lot of infrastructure, and probably way more maintenance than a good pony. In hindsight, replacing animals with machines was one of the biggest factors that explained the economic boom of the past 200 years. To be brief, although many people lost their jobs with this shift towards mechanization, the creation of new jobs out of thin air, the new industry demanded, greatly offset the initial economic downturn. The important thing here is a groundbreaking innovation, as I mentioned earlier. If there's enough improvement in terms of productivity by decreasing the cost of operation or increasing output, it's very likely that the economy will end up being better off. The cost of operating a car can be argued against that of riding a horse. However, motor vehicles have undoubtedly better benefits than animals. To state the obvious, they are cruelty-free, as far as I'm concerned. Leather interiors aside. Fast forward now 60 or 70 years, and put yourself in the 90s. Substance abuse is still an issue, but at least now they don't come inside colorful soda cans. Banks were nothing like the ones we are used to now, and actually, most of their employees were tellers. Their only job was taking cash deposits and handing over withdrawals, something pretty mechanical for a human, but absolutely essential for the business. Enter the automatic teller machine. It took until the mid-90s for the technology to catch on, but when it did, nothing was ever the same again. Tellers were deemed unnecessary because their main task was now replaced by a set of electronic parts that didn't need brakes, nor made a lot of errors, and although costly at first, didn't require compensation in the form of salary. The interesting thing in this example, again, is that it wasn't the end of the world, not even for bank employees. You see, as the task of dealing with physical money was relegated to machines, the productivity of the sector skyrocketed. Managers were now able to hire or repurpose existing hires to explore and develop new areas of business, and surely they did hire and grew the bottom line. The thing is that these new machines cut the required staff of the average branch in half, but as branches became cheaper to operate, more were opened across the country. By the end of the decade, the number of tellers nationwide not only didn't show any signal of a hit, but it kept its upward trend as if nothing ever happened, and even expanded faster than the workforce as a whole. If I didn't lose you up to this point, you surely are still asking, but what about music? Well, the thing with music is slightly different, because there's a big creative, and dare I say soulful component to it. However, auto-tune and melodyne have been industry standards for the last 2 decades. Little by little, music, mostly in the mainstream, has been less played and more engineered. And there's nothing inherently bad about that. Don't get me wrong. It's just a different sound. Now, the next step in this robotization of music is probably AI taking over a lot more roles in the process. From harmony to melodies to arrangements, even sound design. Can you imagine describing a certain synth sound to a prompt-based interface such as ChatGPT and the software spitting out a preset in a matter of seconds? I don't think that's too far from our current reality, if not already here. We are now at a point in history, as musicians, similar to what horseshoe makers faced in the early 1900s, or what bank tellers lived in the mid-90s. The silver lining is, we have their experiences to try and imagine what our future might look like. Music AIs will kill the music industry as we know it, and shape it into a different thing. Music as a whole will be democratized. Such as how Auto-Tune and Melodyne made singing accessible to the masses, the next generation of apps like Boomy, SoundDraw, or Soundful will allow anyone to create tolerable songs. But what will happen with musicians when anyone can do their job? Well, first of all, not really anyone would be able to do their job. At least for a while, these new technologies are unlikely to be able to create and iterate over ideas with the naturality a trained musician could. And if they could, I would argue that someone who knows the craft will be more capable of writing the exact prompts required to tailor the best possible outcomes. Think of AI software as a productivity enhancer. Musicians will be able to work on more different ideas and finish up songs quicker, since they will be assisted in their process by the machine. Just as the leap experienced when going from tape recordings to digital workstations, the productivity boost would be similar. Now, for the losers of this equation, because don't get me wrong, there will be players losing their jobs, there will be opportunities to adapt. With naturally more music dumped into the media, competition will be fierce, and curation will take a big role. Not only that, marketing, for instance, will also be fundamental for new artists trying to make a name for themselves. Also, on the other side of things, there will be more and more people required to develop these AI musical assistants, test them, and sell them. Live performances will still be a thing, since we are social creatures, and someone will have to play the songs robots wrote for an audience. But hey, if robots figure out how to play the guitar, there will still be a need for people running the concert logistics. Really, predicting the future always makes for pretty funny content when watched in retrospect. So I will stop making a fool of myself now. The important thing to take home about this industry-wide panic, especially if you want to keep your job, or at least a job, is to stay up to date with the tech and be flexible to adapt your work in ways that it can leverage AI. Finally, there are still businesses out there running on fax machines, and musicians still pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for old pieces of wood with strings attached to them made in the 50s. I think we have a few decades left.